live and archived games. Read about the teams and players. Relive the big moments. Every season, the Trib Live High School Sports Network is your home for high school sports. The best seat in the house is on Trib HSSN.
It's almost like I never went home. Back at world headquarters of the Trib Live High School Sports Network, I'm Don Rebel. Good afternoon. Saturday, it's Selection Saturday around the WPIAL. The brackets have been released. Run them down for you, and we'll get the musings of Kyle Dawson and Mitch Montani coming up, two of our experts in high school football, joining me here on the Playoff Pairing Show. The WPIAL Football Playoff Pairing Show is presented by our good friends at Edgar Snyder and Associates. Go local, go with Edgar, helping injured people since 1982. Edgar Snyder and Associates, proud sponsor of our WPIAL playoff coverage, not only here in football, but also come winter and spring, because, you know, we do go year-round in these parts. Thanks to our good friends at Edgar Snyder for sponsoring our coverage of the WPIAL playoffs, which actually will begin with this show here in today, and then next Friday, first round / quarterfinal action as far as 4A. Then you have quarterfinals / semifinals. Once again, and it's all dictated by the PIAA playoffs, because the 6A winner and the 4A winner from District 7, the WPIAL, they're slotted into the state playoffs in the quarterfinals, so they have to win 2 games to get to the state championship, whereas the other 4 classifications, they are slotted into the semifinals. You only have to win 2. People, will say, why is 6A this? Why is 4A? Well, it's all dictated by the state. So there you go. All right, 6A, we're going to have to wait a while before the semifinals. Again, 4 teams making it into the postseason. That Norwin-Mount Lebanon game was the key in week 9. Norwin prevails, so they get the 3 seed. Mount Lebanon out. Canamac, despite losing big to Central Catholic, gets the 4 seed. And they will take on the Central Catholic Vikings again in the semifinals. Friday, November 7th, the site of that game is to be determined. It will be a home game for Central Catholic. Where it will be released at a later date by the WPIAL. The other semifinal game, number 2, North Allegheny, number 3, Norwood. Technically, they tied for second place in Class 6A, and they did win the head-to-head matchup earlier this year. It was a close game, but the Tigers prevailed. Thus, that game, Norwin at North Allegheny, will be at Newman Stadium at North Allegheny High School, Friday, November 7th, 7 p.m. So all 4 of those teams in Class 6A will enjoy next week off, as will some teams in the other classifications, with the exception of Class A. As we move to 5A, there are 4 first-round byes. The top seed is the defending champion, the Pine Richland Rams. The number 2 seed, undefeated Peters Township. The number 3 seed is the Big East Conference winner, Woodland Hills. And the 4th seed is the runner-up in the Big East Conference, the Penn Trafford Warriors. Those 4 teams all off next week. 4 first-round games coming up on Friday, October 31st. That's right, trick or treat. In your the kids could come home with something really good or a 40-point loss. It's really a mixed bag when it comes to what's going to happen on Halloween night. The 8-9 game, the number 8 seed is the Shaler Titans. They finished in a tie for second place after losing to Pine Richland in week 9, tied with North Hills for second place. They win that head-to-head tiebreaker. They are the number 2 team out of the Northeast Conference. They will host the number 3 team out of the Big East Conference, the Kiski Area Cavaliers. The Cavs won a 3-way tie via tiebreaker points. not Gardner points, tiebreaker points, with Armstrong and Gateway to secure the number 3 spot. Kiski area at Shaler Friday at 7 o'clock. The winner goes on to play Pine Richland. The 5-12 game, the 5 seed is the Moon Tigers. Some debate whether Moon should have been the 4th seed, but Penn Trafford did beat them head-to-head earlier this year. So the Warriors get the 4 seed. Moon, 5 seed. They will host the 12th seed Armstrong Riverhawks, one of the 3 wild card teams in the 5A playoffs. Armstrong was the 4th team out of the Big East Conference. Armstrong at Moon Friday, 7 o'clock, winner to play 4th seed Penn Trafford in 2 weeks. The 7-10 game, the 7th seed, the Bethel Park Blackhawks. Thumped pretty good by Peters Township in week 9, but they've had a strong season to finish in 4th place in the Allegheny 6 Conference. The Blackhawks will be hosting as the 7th seed the North Hills Indians. Mentioned they tied Shaler for 2nd place in the Northeast Conference. So North Hills at Bethel Park Friday at 7 o'clock. The Hawks, like Armstrong, a wild card team. Winner of Bethel Park North Hills will play at Peters Township in 2 weeks. Finally, the 6-11 game, the 6th seed, the Upper St. Clair Panthers, won last night against Baldwin, but they lost to Moon for 2nd place in the Allegheny 6 Conference 2 weeks ago. USC will be hosting the Plum Mustangs. Dramatic fashion for Kyle Dawson's alma mater. Plum trying to get the game-winning field goal. It's blocked by Penn Hills. Ball's loose. Kicker picks it up, and he is kind of tush-pushed into the end zone for the game-winning score with seconds remaining. Plum finishes as the 4th place team in the Northeastern Conference and gets a wild card. They will be visiting the Upper St. Clair Panthers. So your 3 wild cards again are Bethel Park as the 7th seed, Plum as the 11th seed, Armstrong as the 12th seed, South Fayette. They finished in 5th place last year, made the playoffs, do not make it here in 2025, and we will be talking about that. All right, Class 4A, like 6A, again, only a 3-week playoff, so they'll go quarterfinals Friday, semifinals on the 7th of November, and then their championship game at Pine Richland High School, noon on Saturday, November 15th. Number 1 seed, the McKeesport Tigers. I think once they got Keemon Spell back healthy, they showed why they were the team to beat coming into this season. McKeesport is the number 1 seed as the champions of the GAC. They will be hosting the 8th seed Chartiers Valley Colts. They get one of the 2 wild cards, the number 3 team out of the Big 6 Conference. Chartiers Valley is in and will visit McKeesport on Friday. The 4th seed, the Thomas Jefferson Jaguars, the runners-up in said Big 6 Conference. Behind Trinity, TJ will be hosting the Mars Fighting Planets, the runners-up in the Greater Allegheny Conference. Mars at TJ on Friday at 7 o'clock. The 2 seed is the Trinity Hillers. The Big 6 Conference champions climb all the way to the number 2 seed. They will be taking on the other wild card in 5A, the Aliquippa Quips, the team that finished in 3rd place in the Parkway Conference after all the tiebreakers were figured out. Montour and Newcastle were the conference champions. Newcastle getting the higher spot since they beat Montour earlier this year. Montour 2nd. Aliquippa beats out West Allegheny due to head-to-head tiebreaker for 3rd place, and Aliquippa gets a wild card. 32 years in a row, the Quips have made the playoffs. Aliquippa at Trinity at 7 o'clock. 3-6 matchup. The conference champions in the Parkway Conference will meet in the first round. 6th seed, the Montour Spartans. I couldn't explain why they were the number 1 seed last year. I can't explain why they're the number 6 seed this year. They will be headed back to Taggart Stadium to take on the Newcastle Red Hurricanes Friday, 7 o'clock at Newcastle High School. I think a lot of folks were scratching their heads when the 4A brackets came out a year ago, and not much has changed. Let's go to 3A now. This is a 12-team playoff field. Top 4 teams make it into the quarterfinals with first-round byes. Number 1 seed, no shock, the Avonworth Antelopes, the champions of the Western Hills Conference. The number 2 seed, receiving a first-round bye, the champions of the Allegheny 7 Conference, the Saints of Imani Christian, both the Antelopes and the Saints with perfect regular seasons. The 3 seed, not the Interstate Conference champions like a lot of us thought, it's the runners-up in the Western Hills Conference. The Central Valley Warriors finished the season strong after a slow start, but they were playing some heavyweights in higher classifications. Can't hold that against them. Central Valley is the number 3 seed. They get a first-round bye. Then the Interstate Conference champion, Elizabeth Forward Warriors, get the number 4 seed. So the 4 first-round matchups on Friday, October 31st. The 8th seed is the Freeport Yellow Jackets. They were playing last night at Imani Christian for a share of the championship in the Allegheny 7 Conference. Didn't go so well for the Jackets. They lost. They slipped down to the number 3 team out of the conference and 3rd place out of the Allegheny 7 Conference. But they still get a home game. As the 8th seed, they will host the 9th seed Beaver Bobcats. Beaver, the number 4 team. This is a wild card team, so the number 4 team out of the Western Hills Conference. Beaver at Freeport at 7 o'clock, the winner to move on to the quarterfinals to play at Avonworth. The 5th seed is North Catholic. Shootout victory over Hopewell last night to secure 3rd place in the Western Hills Conference. They will be taking on the 12th seed Borough Buccaneers, another wild card team. They finished in 4th place in the Allegheny 7 Conference by virtue of a big victory over Deer Lakes last week, or last night, I should say. Borough against North Catholic, side of that game still up in the air. North Catholic plays their home games at J.C. Stone Field, but that is not what's written in the brackets. We'll wait and see. Site to be determined. Friday, 7 o'clock for Borough against North Catholic. The winner will move on to the quarterfinals to take on Elizabeth Forward. 7th seed is the Southmoreland Scotties. Only 1 loss all year. That was to Elizabeth Forward a couple weeks ago. They get the 7th seed as the number 2 team out of the Interstate Conference, and they will host at Russ Grimm Field the Hopewell Vikings. They are entertaining. Hopewell is. Of course, they have the super sophomore Boo Boo Armstrong as their starting quarterback. Young team of the future, dipping their toe in the playoff waters. Here's your WPIAL playoff pairing show factoid. The Hopewell victory, or the Hopewell entrance into the postseason, they lost last night to North Catholic, but Hopewell getting in ends the longest current playoff drought in the WPIAL. This is the first time Hopewell is into the postseason since 2012. That was the longest current drought. There are other teams. Bronzeville hasn't made it since 2000, Uniontown, Connellsville, but because those teams are independent, they don't count. Hopewell had the longest. This is the second year in a row that streak has been broken. Carlinton was the previous longest team with the playoff drought, 2001 until they made it last year, and now Hopewell, 2012, they make it this year, ending that playoff drought. Hopewell at Southmoreland, Friday, 7 o'clock, the winner moving on to play Imani Christian. Finally, the 6th seed is the Highlands Golden Rams. They beat Freeport late in the season, and they get the number 2 team, or the 2 seed out of the Allegheny 7 Conference. They're the 6th seed in the tournament. They will host the Derry Trojans. Strong finish for Derry to finish in 3rd place in the Interstate Conference. They beat up on York in week 9. Derry at Highlands, Friday, 7 o'clock, with the winner moving on to play number 3 seed Central Valley. To 2A we go. I think everybody thought South Allegheny was going to be at the top of the bracket, but then Steel Valley said, and the Ironmen pulling off the stunner last night in Glassport, handing South Allegheny their first loss. So who's number one? That was really the big question coming into today. I think the other 5 classifications, clear-cut number one, not so much in 2A. It's the Century Conference champions, the Seton LaSalle Rebels. They went to the championship game a year ago, losing to South Park. They are the number 1 seed in this year's tournament after beating Washington in a Century Conference championship game last night. Seton LaSalle, a first-round bye. 2 other byes in the 2A field. It's a field of 13 teams. Western Beaver, the champions of the the Midwestern Athletic Conference, they get a first-round bye as the number 2 seed. And Steel Valley, coming off the upset of South Allegheny, they finish in a 3-way tie for the Allegheny Conference Championship with South Allegheny and Apollo Ridge. They all played each other. They all beat each other. WPIAL tiebreaker points, not Gardner points. Gives it to Steel Valley, and they get themselves a first-round bye. So that's huge for Ray Brazo's squad. All right, let's break down the first-round matchups. The number 8 seed, the Mohawk Warriors, Bobby Fadden and company. Bobby, a little teaser here, our WPIAL Week 9 Player of the Week. Mohawk strong finish, winning their last 3 games, including a victory at Riverside last week to finish in 3rd place in the Midwestern Athletic Conference. In Bessemer, the boys of Bessemer will host the Chargers of Our Lady of the Sacred Heart, one of the 4 wildcard teams in Class 2A. Olsh finished in 4th place in the Allegheny Conference, and they picked up a victory over playoff-bound Keystone Oaks in a non-conference game last night. Olsh at Mohawk Friday at 7 o'clock. The 4th seed is South Allegheny, so they won't have a first-round bye, but they will have a first-round home game. The Gladiators will be hosting the Waynesburg Central Raiders, another wild card team, the 4th place team out of the Century Conference. Waynesburg Central at South Allegheny at 7 o'clock. That's the 13-4 game. The 5th seed is the Washington Little Prexies, the runners-up in the Century Conference after losing at Dormont Stadium last night. Washington will host the Beaver Falls Tigers. Beaver Falls became the number 5 team out of the Midwestern Athletic Conference, so obviously a wild card team. What a turnaround. Winless year last year. Started the season 0-4 this year, but they finished strong. Couple stumbles late, but nonetheless, they are back into the postseason. Remember, before last year's winless season, they had appeared in the WPIAL 2A championship game 3 straight years. So they are back in the playoffs. Beaver Falls at Washington Friday at 7 o'clock. The winner of that will play the winner of the Waynesburg South Allegheny game. The Apollo Ridge Vikings, one of 3 teams to tie for the Allegheny Conference Championship, will be hosting the Riverside Panthers, the number 4 team, a wild card team out of the Midwestern Athletic Conference, Friday at the Owen Field in Apollo. That's a 7 o'clock start. The winner of Riverside at Apollo Ridge will play at Western Beaver under those spiffy new lights in Industry on Friday, November 7th. Finally, the 6th seed is the Elwood City Wolverines, the runners-up to Western Beaver in the Midwestern Athletic Conference. Big come-from-behind victory over Beaver Falls to secure 2nd place in the MAC. They will host the Keystone Oaks Golden Eagles, the number 3 team out of the Century Conference. Lost last night, lost in week 8, but did enough before that to secure 3rd place in the Century Conference. Keystone Oaks at Elwood City, Friday at 7 o'clock. The winner will play in Munhall at Campbell Field the following Friday, November 7th, against number 3, Steel Valley. And finally, in Class A, no buys, full old school 16 team field. The number 1 seed goes to the 2-time defending champions, the Fort Cherry Rangers. They will be hosting one of the 4 wild cards in Class A, the 4th place team from the Tri-County South. Yes, the TCS gets 4 teams this year. Remember last year in this format, first year of this format, they only had 4 teams. Let's give it up for the Avella Eagles. The fourth place team, and to get in as the fourth place team out of the TCS, they were actually tied in tiebreaker points, not Gardner points. It was a three-way tie. Carmichael's, Avella, and Beth Center. Both Avella and Beth Center finished at -8. I think Waynesburg was -12, 19, something like that. So Beth Center and Avella ended up tied. Avella beat Beth Center, so that's how they became the fourth place team, and they get themselves a playoff spot. Avella at Fort Cherry, two former conference foes, Friday, 7 o'clock in McDonald. The 8th seed, the Leechburg Blue Devils, took it on the chin last night against Greensburg Central Catholic, but nonetheless, strong year for the Blue Devils. They finished as the 8th seed, and they will be hosting the Neshannock Lancers. They also lost last night, didn't take it on the chin. It was a competitive game. They fell to Laurel 14-7, thus dropping them instead of a conference championship or a share of the conference championship. Neshannock finishes in third place in the Big 7 Conference. Neshannock at Leechburg at 7 o'clock on Friday, the winner playing the Avella Fort Cherry winner. Fourth seed, speaking of Laurel, the Spartans are the number one seed. Only one loss all year, and that was to Bishop Canavan earlier this year. Mitch Montani and I had the call on that one. Laurel, your Big 7 Conference champions, will host the Jefferson Morgan Rockets. Undefeated regular season a year ago. They were undefeated for most of the season until a couple losses down the stretch. They lost to Bentworth, and then last night they lost to California when they had a chance to get a share of the Tri-County South Conference. So they fall to third place. Jefferson Morgan at Laurel on Friday at 7 o'clock in the 4-13 game. The 5-12 matchup, Southside, the number 2 team out of the Big 7 Conference, lost in Week 8 to Laurel. Their only loss in the conference. Southside will be hosting Chartiers Houston. Nice turnaround season for the Buccaneers. They were home for the playoffs a year ago. They were the number 3 team out of the Black Hills Conference this season. Chartiers Houston at Southside in Hookstown Friday at 7 o'clock. The winner plays the Laurel Jefferson Morgan winner in the quarterfinals. 2 seed, the Clairton Bears. They have not allowed a point since Imani Christian in week 0. The Bears will be hosting the Monessen Greyhounds. These 2 teams over the years have been conference foes here and there in the old Eastern Conference. 7 o'clock at Tyler Boyd Stadium for Monessen at Clairton. Monessen beating Cornell last night, to get the 4th place team, or to become the 4th place team out of the Black Hills Conference and secure a wild card berth. The number 7th seed is the Bentworth Bearcats, the number 2 team out of the Tri-County South. They get themselves a home playoff game for Ben Hayes and company. They will be hosting the Jeanette Jayhawks, the number 3 team out of the Eastern Conference. Jeanette at Bentworth Friday at 7 o'clock. The winner of that game will play the winner of Monessen at Clairton. 3 seed is Bishop Canavan, the runners-up to Fort Cherry in the Black Hills Conference. Again, probably the difference here that gave the Crusaders the number 3 seed was that victory over Laurel earlier this year. Bishop Canavan will be taking on Greensburg Central Catholic. That upset of Leechburg last night helps the Centurions. They finish in 5th place in the Eastern Conference. So the Eastern Conference gets 5 playoff teams. So congratulations to the Centurions. They make the trek to Dormont Stadium Friday to take on Bishop Canavan. 6th seed, Tri-County South winners, the California Trojans. They will be hosting the Fraser Commodores. The boys from Perryopolis finishing in 4th place with a victory over Springdale last night that put them in 4th place in the Eastern Conference, and they earned themselves a wild card. I mentioned the Trojans, outstanding season, only 1 loss, perfect in the Tri-County South after beating Jefferson Morgan last night. The Fraser at California winner will play the winner of the Greensburg Central Catholic Bishop Canavan game in the Class A quarterfinals on Friday November 7th. All right, we'll take a break. When we return, we'll bring in the experts, Kyle Dawson, Mitch Montani, chomping at the bit to give us their opinions, not only on the brackets, the wild card selections et al. We'll do that when we return. It's the WPIAL Football Playoff Pairing Show, and it's presented by Edgar Snyder and Associates. Go local, go with Edgar, helping injured people since 1982. Proud sponsor of this here show and proud sponsor of our playoff coverage right here on the Trib Live High School Sports Network.
This is Micah. He tweaked his shoulder. So did Max. And Miles did too. And while they could all use some quality PT, at AHN Sports Medicine, we know they each need a little something different to make a comeback. Our doctors and specialists pinpoint that difference and make a personalized rehab plan to protect Miles' backswing and Max's throwing arm and Micah's serve. Because at AHN Sports Medicine, we see you.
You're watching the Trib Live High School Sports Network.
All right, we are back. It's the WPL Football Playoff Pairing Show presented by Edgar Snyder and Associates. Go local. Go with Edgar. Good job, Christopher. Helping injured people since 1982. Again, not only this show here today, it's sort of kicking off our coverage of the 2025 WPL Football Playoffs, but all of our playoff coverage all year long is powered by our friends at Edgar Snyder and Associates. All right, let's bring in the boys in the band. Kyle Dawson, Mitch Montani, right on cue, kind enough to join us for Selection Saturday. Guys, appreciate you joining us. Thank you. I know there's a lot of opinions about the fly. First of all, congratulations to both of you. First to Mitch Montani. I believe he is the president of the Chartiers Valley School District. No, he's not. He's on the school board, but nonetheless. But one step at a time, you'll eventually get there. Congratulations to your Chartiers Valley Colts. Get a wild card in Class 4A. And Kyle Dawson's alma mater, the Plum Mustangs. Congratulations, Kyle. They get a wild card in Class 5A.
Tough battle to get in there last night. Quite the finish in the land of Elliker Road up in Plum, as people are circulating on social media. Yeah, good job by Plum to get in through kind of a trying year to some degree, and kudos to the Colts as well, which I'm sure we'll get into pretty heavily.
Yeah, I'm psyched. I'm very glad to see the Colts in the playoffs for the first time in 5 seasons, and they earned it. I mean, and we can talk about it when we talk about the 4A bracket. I had a really good feeling coming into the day that they would get in just based on previous matchups and the overall record and what they've done this season. But props to the Colts. They're back in the dance, and they have a tough matchup against McKeesport, but a big accomplishment to make it in what is a, comparatively to the other brackets, small 4A bracket.
We got a coin here. That's an eagle. See that eagle? And that is, I don't know, Pocahontas? I have no idea. So we're going to flip to see who decides where we start here. Kyle, you're longest tenured here, aren't you?
I think so. By a few years.
So you're going to call either eagle or Pocahontas when I flip. Here we go.
Eagle.
Okay, I'm not going to catch it. You said eagle?
Yeah.
It is the eagle.
Jeez.
Congratulations. Do you defer? No.
I can defer to the second half.
So shall we start 6A or and down or 1A and up?
let's start 6A and down, just because 6A is I think 6A is, as everyone knows, is probably the easiest to get through.
Yeah, if the committee spent more than 3 seconds on this bracket, I mean, it's because 6A is so limited. Let me just start before we go into 6A. Our good friend Chris Harlan had a great piece coming out of the WPIAL, a very eventful WPIAL monthly meeting, Board of Control meeting, in which Scott Seltzer announced his retirement. Congratulations to Scott and all his success during his career. Vince Sortino moves from one office to the other and becomes the executive director. So congratulations to both on that. But another thing that came out of the meeting is, this is a realignment year. The enrollment numbers are getting, collected now by the state. They will announce their cutoffs and, this number for this class, this number for this class. And that'll come out in November or maybe early December. And then once those numbers come out, the WPIAL can get to work as far as forming conferences. Well, there are some big ideas for football specifically as far as what the district should do going forward. Mike O'Brien, who I remember talking to last year about this, has an idea for a very unique system, but kind of complicated, to be honest with you. I'm no mathematician. I rely on Kyle's favorite, the abacus, but his might be a little too deep in the water. The other was, just sort of kind of tweaking, trying to get a little more balance as far as competitive balance into the classifications. Although, what is competitive now, 2 years from now, could look completely different. The other one was that Chris focused on was a return to 4 classifications, which, oh my goodness, that is manna from heaven in my eyes. Just wanted to get your thoughts because of 6A specifically, to be honest with you. Do we go back to the future? Is that the best thing? Or does this system with 6 classifications just need tweaking?
I saw the piece yesterday, but I admittedly haven't read the entire thing yet to see I think there's 4 plans or whatever the deal was there. I think 6 classifications for a few years has been really rough. At the beginning of the 6 classification move, I don't think it was nearly as, I don't want to say bad because I don't think that's a fair classification, but I don't think that it is nearly as good as it has been in the past. 6A doesn't have enough teams, and 6A doesn't have enough competitive teams.
Right.
One of the things we'll talk about with 6A when we get to that bracket here, and as you're seeing on the screen at home, 4 teams make the playoffs. And to be quite honest, in any other year other than this year, 1 and 2 we know are going to the championship. Central Catholic and North Allegheny, and we know Central Catholic pretty much is going to be one of those 2 teams that are in the championship. So I think 6A is rough. 5A has been pretty much uber competitive for the last several years. It's somewhat top heavy, I guess, this year, maybe as opposed to the last few years, but 5A's produced really good brackets. I just think it's 6 classifications, you're spread a little bit too thin. And to be honest, I think as we've gotten into the 6 classification system over the years, I think we're also just seeing, I don't want to call it a decline in football numbers, but there are just so many options for these kids to play in the fall. And I think that has impacted talent level. I think that's impacted roster size at a bunch of different places. But to be fair, I don't think there's any real fair, perfect solution, whether that's going back to 4 classes or tweaking whatever regionally or to limit travel or based on roster size. I just don't think there's any perfect solution right now to solve what I don't think is a major problem, but is definitely there's tiers in WPIL football right now that make it a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Kyle. And I spent the season covering Class 6A, and what's crazy about it is we're talking about a league basically within itself of 7 teams. And that's remarkably better than it was 2 years ago. For the last realignment, there were only 5.
Yeah.
And so I think this year has provided more parity than we've seen in years, basically everywhere from everybody under Central Catholic. There was a lot of parity. There were fun matchups throughout the course of the year, but I think it's clear that that is the weakest link of the 6 classification format. It's Class 6A because it just doesn't have the numbers in terms of teams. And without it, that many teams, it's hard to get a lot of competition. And for at least the last few years, my personal idea for how things should be structured, I think, is a little unique, and I'm on an island of my own. But I almost think we talk about 4 classifications versus 6. I think 5's the sweet spot. I really do. Having 5 classifications, I know it would really throw off the entire board, but I think it would represent a good switch up when it comes to some of those teams that are in the top of enrollment in Class 5A squeezing up into the new 5A in that type of format and creating more of a competitive balance from top to bottom. But it's unique and it's a challenge regardless of what comes next.
And I know there are folks in 2A and 3A who have had competitive seasons because, to be honest, it's kind of watered down now, and they're okay with that. And there's something to be said for that. But when your biggest schools and your biggest classifications are settled into Yawnsville, that isn't good for the league. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed, whether it's like, Mitch mentioned, maybe a 5A, going to 5 classifications, or just going back to 4A. I think it's something that you look at. If you go back to the way it was, and in 2 years you're thinking, well, this was a train wreck or this didn't work, you can always go back. And you don't have to be necessarily, oh, this is going to be it for the future, forever. But I think it's something they really need to address, because 6A, it's broken. Chris, you can go back to the 6A now as we talk about that. Yeah, 2 games again in 2 weeks. Kanamak Central Catholic, the rematch of the game Mitch just called last night, and Norman North Allegheny. And I think that's something that whether you want to put North Allegheny, and I know they're I'd love to hear the story. I have a feeling that they had nothing to play for last night. They had nothing to play for in week 8 in that game against Pine Richland. So there might have been guys that were rested. I don't know for sure, but let's just assume that it's just North Allegheny isn't as dominant as what we've seen over the last few years. The one thing, the battles for 3 and 4, even though North Allegheny played a lot of close games, it became very evident that they were going to finish in the top 2. Kanamak, Norwin, Mount Lebanon, Seneca Valley. It was good competitive between those teams. Again, much lower than where Central Catholic is, and to an extent North Allegheny. But the North Allegheny first matchup was a good one. The Tigers beat the Knights in a very competitive game, and now they get to play again in 2 weeks at North Allegheny High School. I'll start with you, Mitch, since, again, you've seen a lot of 6A football. Just quick thoughts on these 2 games before we get Kyle's 2 cents.
Well, I think when you look at the left side of the bracket, you know what's going to happen there. We saw it last night, and Central Catholic, with the exception of what I think was a 15-point win over NA, has had its way with every opponent in conference that they've faced this season. And I think they're the clear-cut favorite to win it all here in Class 6A. But it's very interesting the difference with Canon Mac, with covering every game they had all season. they were in every single conference game they played. Despite the 2-4 conference record, they had the 3-point loss to Norwin last week, and most games have been for them in that same vein. But last night they just ran into a juggernaut in Central Catholic. And so I expect that one will go similar to how it did yesterday, and the Vikings will move on. And then on the right side of the bracket, should be an intriguing matchup. And I think, as Kyle talked about earlier, we haven't seen that in years past. Usually it's we know the 1, we know the 2, we know they're going to meet come championship time. But that's not the case. I think the Norwin Knights have a very real opportunity, and especially given how close they played against North Allegheny the first time around, to get into the Class 6A title game.
Yeah, Giovanni Rothruff, and hopefully I'm saying that name right, for Norwin last night. Big night, 260 plus yards, believe was the number, and getting a win to go to the 3 seed. And I think Mitch mentioned on the roundtable last night that Ken and Matt kind of backed in a little bit on top of it. I know you're saying they're in it in pretty much all of their games so far, but 3 straight losses to end the regular season. Their 6A wins are against the 2 teams that would have been the next guys in Mount Lebanon and Seneca Valley. And a little bit of a stunner, I guess, last night. Again, not knowing the entire story with what North Allegheny and Seneca Valley got into last night. This still isn't, and it doesn't feel like to me, is the North Allegheny that we're used to. 7-3 overall on the year. They've got the loss to Central Catholic. They got pounded by Pine Richland in week 8. Obviously, that is a little bit of an eye-opener, the way that it finished. I mean, there were a ton of teams that played Pine Richland this year that were more competitive against the Rams than the Tigers were. But yeah, I would think that we have a pretty good semifinal on the right side of the bracket, a competitive game with Norwin. Tristan Tavares has been awesome for the Knights all year, and NA, see if they can get that rematch with Central Catholic. But in all due respect to Cannon McMillan, it would certainly seem that Central Catholic is well on its way to at least playing for another 6A championship and seeing if they can take that trophy home with them.
Again, not next week, 2 weeks, those 6A semifinals from North Allegheny and from to be determined for a home game for Central Catholic. All right, let's go to 5A. Before we throw up the brackets and everything in each class, I think what we'll do is just touch on the wild card team, see if the committee got it right, because all 16 wild cards are determined by the WPIAL football steering committee. Mitch and I had some of these discussions last night on the round table, but in class 5A, 3 wild cards, one from the Allegheny 6 conference, and that's Bethel Park. One from the Big East conference, that's Armstrong, and one from the Northeast conference, that's Plum. My bracketology that we put out in the wee hours of the morning, Chris Harlan and I had Bethel Park, and we talked, that's kind of obvious. I also had Plum with their victory. I just don't see how you leave South Fayette out. They finished in 5th place last year. They made it. They finished in 5th place this year. They defeated a 1-loss team in Elizabeth Forward. They defeated a 2-loss team in Chartiers Valley. Yes, lower classifications, but the best non-conference victory for Armstrong was against a 500 team in Hampton, and that's it. The Allegheny 6 conference, stronger top to bottom than the Big East conference. That really stunned me that the Lions didn't get in.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by that too, as I was kind of making some notes before the brackets came out, a little bit before we got on the air for the Pairings show here. I was a little stunned that South Fayette did not make it in, and I think Mitch made the point last night. It was one of you guys on the roundtable that the Allegheny 6 hasn't been as good this year. I don't think it's as much of a convincing argument as it was maybe a year ago. when all 5 teams got in. But I don't see any reason, and no disrespect to Armstrong. I know they've got the district's leading receiver and a good offense. But Hampton, Don mentions, is their best win. And there were people in the comments section and on social media complaining that Gateway didn't get in over Armstrong, and maybe the Gators are a better team than the Riverhawks. I just at 3-7, I don't know that you could have made any argument to put Gateway in. I do think they got the other one right with Plum. I would have put Plum in over Armstrong based on playing a lot closer. They've got a 7-point loss to Shaler, which is a playoff team in 5A. Beat Gateway, only lost by a point to North Hills, which is a playoff qualifier. They've got 3 straight wins. Armstrong, on the other hand, played a couple really good teams. They played Cannon Mac and Bethel Park and Highlands, who were all playoff qualifiers in their respective classifications, but they just really weren't super competitive or super impressive around that. And I know South Fayette's quarterback is hurt. He was dinged up in week 8. I think he played last night.
He played
I
last
thought that close loss to Moon last night would for sure put
agree.
South Fayette in. And no dice, I guess, for the committee to put South Fayette in 5 Allegheny. I just think that conference has been so good. There's an easy argument that conference is the best conference in the entire district, and to not have South Fayette in and put an Armstrong team in that, let's just be real, they're under 500, and they were 3-3 in a much worse conference overall. I don't see the argument for that, but I guess that's why I'm not on the committee, and they were the ones that made the decision. That's the first big issue I had with this release.
Yeah, and I'll back Kyle up on that. And I think something that's telling, and it shows the respect the committee clearly did have for the Allegheny 6 conference. The 4 teams that got in were all top 7 seeds. So you have Peters as the 2, you have Moon as the 5, you have Upper St. Clair as the 6, and you have Bethel Park as the 7. And then after that, 5 teams made the playoffs below those top 4 Allegheny 6 conference teams, the 3 that made it automatically, and then the wild card. And so I guess my feeling on it is if you have so much respect for the conference, then South Fayette held a lot of those opponents close, especially the Moon Tigers last night. And so that's the number 5 seed in your bracket. So I think that's the number one takeaway I have.
I agree, and Kyle made a point about the health of Welhorski, the South Fayette quarterback, and we had mentioned that during the week leading up that, hey, you got to look twice at them if he's not available. Well, he played last night, and again, I thought that once they took Moon down to the wire, that they had their ticket punched, but that's obviously not how the committee felt.
Almost wonder too, and not to interrupt, but how much did they think of it? I know they don't like to play. We're going to talk about 1 and 4A, but don't like to play those first round conference rematches. Maybe, probably not. But Armstrong's not a conference opponent of Moon. South Fayette is. I don't know if that was any part of the discussion at all. I would hope that's not part of the discussion. But
you could have
rematch would hopefully not be a part of what they're thinking and keeping South Fayette out.
You could have probably danced or made a couple changes on the lower end to avoid that. Again, I think the committee, especially in other sports, has said we will try, but we're not going to go out of our way to avoid first round teams from the same conference playing each other. It's kind of, it had always been a rule of thumb, but that's been loosened in recent years. So if that's the reason, then that's really a head scratcher. Let's break down the bracket. 2 first round games on each side of the bracket. We'll start on the left side. Pine Richland there at the very top, well deserved. Penn Trafford also gets a bye as the runner up in the I always want to say Foothills. It's the Big East Conference. So those 2 teams will be waiting, and then they'll be hosting quarterfinal games. Oh, by the way, 8-9 Kiski area at Shaler, and 12-5 Armstrong at Moon.
Yeah, Shaler and Kiski is a unique kind of matchup, and 2 teams that are under 500 is the 8 and 9 seeds. The only 3 wins for the Titans are mostly competitive, other than the win against Fox Chapel. The losses have been, for the most part, competitive. So that's an intriguing 8-9 matchup that'll be played on Friday, Halloween at Shaler. I like Penn Trafford getting the bye over Moon, not because I know for sure that that's a better football team than the Moon Tigers, but Penn Trafford does own a head-to-head win earlier in the year against the Moon Tigers. So I think that's probably the reason why 4 and 5 are where they are. And Penn Trafford is the team that's getting the bye. And as for the Moon Tigers having to play next week in the first round to advance to play that 4-seed Penn Trafford, that could be a really intriguing matchup as well on that side of the bracket. But I would think, and I could be wrong, but it's going to be Pine Richland's side of the bracket, the way things have gone for them to kind of roll into the championship game down at Acrisure and main event that day.
Yeah, I agree with Kyle there. Pine Richland's had a heck of a season without very many blemishes at all, and I would expect them to find their way into the championship at Acrisure. Penn, Trafford, and Moon are really the only teams I think that can truly give Pine Richland at least a run for its money on the left side of the bracket. But those two are going to be on a collision course, and they're going to have to beat each other up, where Pine Richland's going to get whoever wins that 8-9 game. So it's looking good for the Rams on the left side of the bracket, and they should be in pretty darn good shape.
Right side of the bracket, Peters Township number 2, Woodland Hills number 3, as expected, both with first-round byes. 10-7 matchup, North Hills at Bethel Park. The 11-6 matchup, Plum visits Upper St. Clair.
Yeah, and the Panthers have an opportunity to kind of do the reverse of what happened to them a year ago, where they were the number 1 seed in this bracket and ended up losing to one of their conference opponents. That's a little less likely this time with the way the bracket's aligned, but Upper St. Clair's a strong force out of a very good conference, and I certainly expect that they'll be meeting Woodland Hills in what should be an awesome matchup coming up in 2 weeks. And then Peters Township, of course, would be the one waiting for them if they got to that semifinal. And Peters, of course, was the one who beat them when Upper St. Clair was the higher seed a year ago. So we'll see how it works out, but there's a chance that we get some Allegheny 6 conference rematches on that right side of the bracket.
Yeah, I had a chance to see Upper St. Clair a couple weeks ago against Bethel Park. 2 pretty good offenses there, higher potent, if you will. Dante Corey's had a great year for Upper St. Clair running the football. Obviously, the defense is very good. And Ethan Hellman, 3-year quarterback, 4-year quarterback, whatever it is now, he has been tremendous for that program over the course of his career. And I know he's been dealing with some things this year and trying to come back from those things. But, man, that Panthers team as a 6 seed looks dangerous. Plum will have its hands full, though, again, Plum's playing some pretty good football coming into the dance here. Whoever wins that game has to deal with Scoop Smith in the Woodland Hills, the talented, athletic Woodland Hills team. Scoop Smith is averaging darn near 50 yards every touchdown that he scores this year. The big playability is certainly there. And don't sleep on Bethel Park. I know that'll be an interesting matchup if they're able to get by what I think could be a rock fight with North Hills. If they're able to get to Peters and give themselves another chance at that Indians team. Bethel Park's got a great running back in David Dennison, and an offense that has been a little bit on the more firepower side throughout the course of the year, really up until last night. But they've been a really good offense throughout the course of the year, and who knows what happens if they can catch some fire in the postseason here.
Yeah, and that made last night's performance by the number 2 seed, Peters Township, really impressive, shutting down that electric offense for Bethel Park. All right, before we get to Class 4A, just want to remind you the WPIAL Football Playoff Pairing Show is presented by Edgar Snyder and Associates. Go local, go with Edgar, helping injured people since 1982. Our WPIAL playoff coverage beginning today is presented by Edgar Snyder and Associates. I had to wake Chris up there for a second. All right. Class 4A, small bracket, 8 teams, straight to the quarterfinals, no first rounds. It was a head scratcher a year ago, and it's, I guess, a new tradition. We'll start on the left side of the bracket. Stunning. I'm actually, I don't get stunned by much anymore. This bracket was stunning. Chartiers Valley, one of the wild cards, as we talked about at the start of the show, they get in and deserve it. Only 2 wild cards: Chartiers Valley and the number 3 team out of the Big Six Conference, and Aliquippa continues their playoff streak, 32 years now. They get the number 3 as the number 3 team out of the Parkway Conference. They get the other wild card. That's probably the only thing that's not surprising, guys. The 2 wild cards with Aliquippa and Char Valley.
Yeah, I think you could have made a little bit of an argument for West A maybe at halftime last night. Once that game finished the way that it did, and Greg Smith and I had a chance to see that one and saw West A 3 times this year. I just don't think, and I know they played a really tough schedule and didn't complain about it. That only really goes so far. I think Chartiers Valley's win over West Allegheny in week 1 was huge in that discussion. Whether it's week 1 or not, it's a 1-point overtime win. They beat you head to head. And Chartiers Valley was 7-3. I think it's hard no matter who they beat. 7-3 is 7-3, as opposed to 4-5 for West Allegheny. So I think the 8 teams are right in 4A. The order is very confusing, and it was confusing last year too. I made sure to go back and look at that. Last year, I had that Montour Mars game last year. There was a 3-way tie for the Parkway. Last season, Montour was given the 2 seed after a week 9 loss to West A, lost in the quarterfinals. That was a great game against the Fighting Planets. But Aliquippa, the 4 seed, West Allegheny was 8th last year, despite winning that game in week 9. I think playing competitively with Aliquippa, if memory serves. And they got stacked up as an 8 seed against the top seed in Thomas Jefferson. So the second straight year where the 4A bracket, maybe you got the right teams, but the order of the teams is very, very weird.
Yes.
And no disrespect to Trinity. They've had a great year. They ran the table in a conference that, at least at the top side of the conference, is very good. They did play TJ without a bunch of starters. This is a Thomas Jefferson team that at the 4 seed, maybe their pedigree of the program is looked better upon there when the committee was discussing where to seed the Jaguars. But for them to get a home game, that Trinity did beat them pretty handily, but they did it with TJ pretty banged up. And that Jaguars team is starting to get a lot healthier now. My real concern is when we get to the right side of the bracket is when the 2 Parkway co-conference champions are 3-6 and playing each other. That just makes absolutely no sense at all. Newcastle and Trinity, let's keep in mind, lost to Montour earlier this year. That's a 6-4 Trinity team that is placed number 2. And we have one of those rematches from the conference in their co-conference champions meeting against each other in the first or the quarterfinals, I guess, next week. So the bracket is really, really confusing. Again, I think they got the 8 teams right. And there's some intrigue to the matchups themselves, and of course we can talk about those. But the order of the top 4 seeds, maybe really the top 6 seeds, I think is way off from the committee, and I just don't understand how they came to anything 2-6. McKeesport was obviously going to be number 1. Let's keep in mind too that TJ owns a win against McKeesport. I know Keemon Spell didn't play in that game, but TJ beat McKeesport, so maybe that was graded a little bit higher than some of the other results around the class.
I was giving the committee some love for getting the 2 wild cards right, and we wound Kyle up. We wound him up something fierce. And he just went to town on the entire.
They did get the 2 wild cards
bracket.
right. Again, I think the 8 teams are right. Aliquippa had to be in with the win over West A is finishing 3rd. Now, had things gone differently last night at West A, then Aliquippa might be on the outside looking in.
Right, no question.
Is the 4th team out of that conference. So, yeah, I think once that result happened, I think they got the wild cards right, if I can at least save face for that part of the argument.
I don't disagree with anything you said. I'm just saying I just wanted to give them some love for getting the 2 wild cards right. Mitch, Char Valley and Aliquippa wild cards.
Yeah, I agree with most of what Kyle said there. The 2 wild cards are correct, and they're in the right order. 7 and 8 are in the right order. Aliquippa should have been in. We really expected them to be in after that win last night. Char Valley, Kyle talked about it, 7-3 record, had the head-to-head against West Allegheny. I think it was going to be really tough sledding for West Allegheny to make this bracket. So they got the 8 teams right. If you look at where they're jumbled in this thing, it's honestly bizarre, to put it lightly. And especially that conference rematch on the bottom right quadrant, Newcastle and Montour. That is the biggest stunner, I think.
All 3 teams from the Parkway Conference are on that right side. We'll get to the right side in a moment. We can get the brackets up there now. All right, on the left side, Chartiers Valley, tough task, as Mitch mentioned earlier in the show. They are in, though. They get to travel to take on the Great Keeman Spell and the McKeesport Tigers. And Thomas Jefferson does get a home game, the defending champs. Boy, they've been beat up this year. Bill Cherpak told me at one point he doesn't remember having this many injuries. Some of them are getting healthy, though, so that could be a dangerous cat here in the postseason. TJ hosting the Mars Fighting Planets.
Yeah, Chirp told me the same thing before the game at Chartiers Valley. I said, man, you're dealing with a lot of injuries. Yeah, this is the worst it's ever been. And let's keep in mind that Chirp is, I think, in his 31st year as the head coach of the TJ Jaguars. So it's been a long time since he has been running that program, and to have as many injuries as they have and to still be 8-2 is very impressive. It might not be the Thomas Jefferson that we know so well and the dominant team that Thomas Jefferson can be. But again, the loss to Trinity was with a bunch of guys hurt. They beat McKeesport, granted with Spell out and not playing, but that's still an impressive victory and should be a feather in their cap. Tyler Eber's the real deal. He can really run the football. They just ran it all over Chartiers Valley a couple weeks ago in that Week 8 matchup. So TJ's got a handful, though, with Mars, because I think that's a pretty good football team as well that can really run the ball on top of it. So it's going to be a battle there of whoever can stop the run a little bit better at TJ on Friday night. I like the Chartiers Valley Colts roster. I like the team. Sean Spence has done a great job with that program in his first year. And I know the wins aren't exactly against world beaters, but a 7-3 record with, I think, a pretty good quarterback in Luke Miranda, and Tayshawn Lewis has had a good year. We'll see how competitive Chartiers Valley can be. They did really struggle with the run, though, against Thomas Jefferson and Trinity, for that matter, which I think makes things a little bit complicated for them when it comes to trying to stop the McKeesport Tigers offense.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the dark horse in this bracket is Thomas Jefferson. They're going to be flying under the radar a little bit in this bracket. But the last 3 weeks, they have really come on strong, including a win over one of the playoff teams in Char Valley. They have found an identity with Eber. He is terrific, and they're just going to run with only a sophomore quarterback, especially. So I think you can expect Thomas Jefferson to at least be competitive anytime they hit the field in this bracket. And as Dawn mentioned earlier, they're getting healthy and they're healing up and have responded with 3 dominant wins to round out conference play. So I expect the Jaguars are going to be very, very competitive on the left side of that bracket.
Yeah, you guys throwing a lot of love, and deservedly so, at TJ, but Eric Kasparovich's squad has had a good year as well. That's one of the better games coming up this weekend, Mars at Thomas Jefferson. All right, to the right side of the bracket, I feel like we should be traveling to Beaver County or Lawrence County for this part of the bracket. Trinity gets the number 2 seed. Again, despite losing to Montour earlier this year, the Hillers deserved and earned the Big Six Conference Championship. Not sure about the number 2 seed, but they will host Aliquippa at Hiller Stadium on Friday at 7:00. And the two co-champions, I can't remember this ever happening before, meet in the right off the get-go. It's not a first round, it's a quarterfinal matchup, but nonetheless, Montour at Newcastle. Lou Ciro can't be a happy puppy with this. They go to Aliquippa in week 8, beat the Quips. They go to West Allegheny in week 9, beat the Indians, and now they got to go back to Taggart Stadium to face the Red Hurricanes.
Yeah, and that'll be a very good football game. Remember back, just trying to make sure I get the score right here. It was a pretty tough loss for Montour the first go around by 20 points back on the third. So we'll see what happens in the rematch. There's always an advantage to playing a team a second time. I think Aliquippa plays very competitive against Trinity. This is a Trinity team that earned that conference championship. It's still only won 6 games. The Quips are battle tested. They are a perennial playoff team, and I expect that one is going to be very good as well. I think you're going to have 2 games that are pretty close to toss-ups on the right side of this bracket, which is odd when you have a 7-2 and a 6-3 matchup. But we're going to see 2 very competitive games in the fight to get to the semis.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Again, I won't rehash most of what I said before we got kind of digging into it here, but the co-conference champions in the Parkway having to play a first-round matchup is rough. That's a team in Montour that I had a chance to see a couple of times. Good offense, pretty good defense. They played really well last night on the defensive side of the football against a team that likes to run a lot in West Allegheny. They're going to have to deal with that great freshman quarterback at Newcastle. We'll see how that game goes. I do think that Trinity will be helped a little bit by the fact that Marcus Counsell is out and done for the year for Aliquippa. That's an Ivy League-bound quarterback. It could have been a battle of quarterbacks that are both Ivy League bound. In fact, Jonah Williamson is headed to that league to play his college ball. Kudos to Trinity on their first conference championship since 1986. Owen Gardner has been really good for the Hillers too, and that's going to be a tough matchup because Aliquippa can play defense still. I think it's going to be a matter for Aliquippa if they can stay out of the big-time penalty yardage. They suffered a ton of penalties and lost to Montour. I think it was over 200 yards of penalties assessed against the Quips in that Week 8 game, and obviously took care of business last night to get in and extend that playoff streak. Should be a good game. I think if you're the Trinity Hillers, I think there's a lot of people that are talking right now, us included, that they probably shouldn't be the number 2 seed. They've got a chance to go and prove some people wrong on Friday night next week, and I'd be happy to be wrong if it's the Hillers that end up moving on and beating one of those Parkway Conference teams, maybe getting to a championship game in Class 5A. We'll have to see, but I think Trinity's got a lot of talking still to do in trying to back up the committee's decision because I just don't get it. Trinity being the 2 seed over whether it's Newcastle or Montour, given I think Newcastle had to be ahead of Montour, but Trinity does have a loss to Montour early in the year.
I will say this as we wrap up the controversial 4A bracket, and especially on that right side. Jonah Williamson's a beast for Trinity.
Yeah, he's awesome.
We had him on. He was a player of the week 2 years ago, and it really is, when healthy, has had a strong career. He's wrapping things up. That right side, the experience factor is a check mark, a big check mark at that position with Williamson. You have Khalil Good, the backup quarterback now at Aliquippa, as Kyle alluded to, with the injury situation there, and you have a sophomore at Montour and a freshman at Newcastle. So, maybe that's a big check that is for the number 2 seed, the Trinity Hillers. We'll see how it plays out. I think Mitch was right that 2 really tough calls as far as which way you want to lean on that right side of the bracket. All right, let's go to Class 3A now, and then the 3 wild cards in this classification. 2 of them go to the Western Hills Conference, and that surprises nobody. That was a deep competitive conference, even though nobody was touching Avonworth. Beaver as a 9 seed, Hopewell as a 10 seed. Both land wild cards, and the third wild card comes from the Allegheny 7 Conference. The Burrell Buccaneers land that. Any surprises? Any short changes as far as the wild cards?
I don't know that there's short changes. I was a little surprised Hopewell, and I haven't really dug into where teams in each conference are and trying to avoid those as best at times that the committee can. I was a little bit surprised to see Hopewell at 10, but I think that the teams that got the wild card, again, I think they're right. You guys talked about Burrell versus Mount Pleasant yesterday. Burrell has a win over the Vikings, so
Right.
that certainly plays into the cards there, despite the fact that Burrell went 4-6 overall during the regular season. But I think you had to take both teams out of the Western Hills with Beaver and Hopewell. That was a really good game between those two teams earlier in the year. But Hopewell's been so great on offense. I just think there was no argument to keep them out, just to put a Burrell team in or a Mount Pleasant team in. So I'd be content if I'm looking at this bracket with the 3 teams that the committee did pick. Again, I just don't know that, and maybe it's right, all things considered, but putting Hopewell at 10, at least on initial reveal, was a little bit surprising to me.
Yeah, I agree that they got him right, and I like that the Hopewell Vikings are in. Just look at their resume. In addition to, and it gets more and more rare when you get to those final bubble teams, but a team that was above 500, 6-4, and I think that definitely means something. And you look at their conference losses in a very tough Western Hills conference. You lose to Beaver by 1. You lose to Central Valley, another playoff team, by only 16, 2 scores, and then a 1-score game against North Catholic. And so this is a team that I think earned its way into the field, and they're going to be playing football a week from today, or a week from yesterday, I should say.
Yeah, the other Vikings that lose out on the bubble bursts for Mount Pleasant, as Kyle alluded to. Mount Pleasant lost to Burrell earlier this year, so that's a definite advantage Buccaneers. And as far as the 2 Vikings, the 5th place Hopewell, the 4th place Mount Pleasant, I think Mount Pleasant, they got rolled by Southmoreland. They got rolled by EF. The game last week when they lost by 20 to Derry, I think, really did not help their cause at all. So I agree with both of you. All right, left side of the bracket in Class 3A, Avonworth, no surprise, sitting on top. They will await the winner of the 9-8 game, Beaver at Freeport. Elizabeth Forward, surprised that they get the 4 instead of the 3. The Central Valley is pretty strong. The Warriors will await the winner of the 12-5 game. That's Burrell taking on North Catholic.
Yes, I was a little shocked at EF getting the 4, and I'll tell you why, and we'll talk about it when we get into the Central Valley as well. But EF has been a team that quietly, over really the course of the last almost probably closer to a decade than not, has been kind of really good. Even going back to when Mike Collodi was still head coach at EF, and now that program is doing a good job since he has left. And a lot of the reason there is because I think that Ryan Messina is one of the best quarterbacks in the district, and I think he's been that way the last couple of years. My understanding is that he has no interceptions so far this season, so no interceptions in the regular season. Lost some big-time skill players, Charlie Niggett being one of those that I think is at Cal U now, playing college football. Messina's been great, and that EF team has rolled everybody other than the one loss on the season, and that's including steamrolling Southmoreland, and a team that we've been talking about all year is one of the best stories, if not the best story, the entire district this year. They ruled everybody other than a 3-point loss to South Fayette. So that's a really good EF team. And I know Central Valley's been really good. Braddock Ambrose has had a great year and has been good as the quarterback of that Central Valley team. Ethan Shearer has been excellent. But EF was a little surprising at 4. Beaver and Hopewell is an interesting discussion. That 51-50 shootout game that they played in the regular season maybe is the difference in 9 versus 10 there. Hopewell, obviously, I think has a little bit better of a resume if you flip that score. They beat Newcastle earlier in the year, keep in mind. So Hopewell can really sling it. Freeport's a weird case, too, and I think it's all going to be to face the wagon that is Avonworth and Duke John Core's team right now. But Freeport, I think, started 6-0 and lost 3 of 4 or whatever it was to end the season. So they're struggling and backing in a little bit against a Beaver team that can play. But I just don't know that until it's Elizabeth forward, potentially against Avonworth, that anybody can compete with the Antelopes in this bracket.
Yeah, I think Burrell's going to have a tough time with North Catholic. They've had a tremendous season playing out of a very difficult conference, and I think you'll see the EF North Catholic matchup in the semifinals, which should be very intriguing. Freeport Beaver should be a good ball game. As Kyle already discussed, 2 interesting stories there, but I just can't see anybody, especially on the left side of this bracket, beating Avonworth. They've had a tremendous year, but in addition to that, the defending champs have had a tremendous year across classifications. They've beaten Aliquippa. They've beaten Thomas Jefferson. This is a strong team, and I would be awfully surprised if they don't find themselves, at least at the very minimum, at Acrisure Stadium on the 22nd.
Good warning for the Borough Buccaneers. In the last 2 weeks, they have given up 94 points in losses to Imani Christian and a victory over Deer Lakes, 41 to the Lancers. So, what's Joey Felitsky and company going to do to them? We'll find out. Again, that's a sight to be determined, that Borough North Catholic game. All right, right side of the bracket, Imani Christian, undefeated. They don't get as much limelight, I don't think, because of the outstanding season that Avonworth is having. But, the Saints, maybe the team to beat on the right side of the bracket. Central Valley will have something to say to that. Coach Lyon's squad, after the slow start, picks it up and gets a number 3 seed. First round matchups, Hopewell at Southmoreland. Winner gets Imani Christian. Derry at Highlands. Winner gets Central Valley.
What a season for the Scotties, as you like to refer to them, Don. Just a great story. 24-year-old head coach and Coach Schoaf, and he's going to have his hands full against, and Kyle talked about it a moment ago, a Hopewell team that has a great resume, and they can play really strong football. And so that's going to be a very good matchup. But Southmoreland went 9-1, very under the radar, 9-1 effort for the Scotties this season. And so those two teams will battle it out for the very, very exciting task of having to face Imani Christian in 2 weeks. And then Central Valley, they're the favorite in the bottom right quadrant. Just always a power, and they're going to be in it till the end. I expect them to at least find themselves back in the semifinals.
Yeah, great story at Southmoreland. Obviously, all the craziness that kind of surrounded that offseason with Anthony Smith leaving, going to Seton LaSalle, not being road eligible there. And I think he's playing in West Virginia or Ohio now, wherever he is. 23 at the beginning of the year, head coach Dustin Schoaf, 24 now, school record 9-1 season. They're going to have their hands full with a really good Hopewell offense. I wonder in that quarterfinal if Hopewell is able to win that game on the road, if they can score with Imani Christian. Imani has had a great year, and they've been really dominant at 10-0. But there have, just in listening to the scoreboard show and some recaps of the games that we've had with Imani on the network, it seems, and there's a couple of games, the North Catholic game, the Highlands game come to mind, where at least early they maybe don't get out of the box so well. I wonder if in one of these games in the postseason push come to shove, when all these teams are pretty good, if a slow start could cost Imani Christian, or if that athleticism can and speed can catch up with whatever the situation is at the beginning of the game. Intriguing to see how Imani gets through this bracket. And the Highlands Dairy winner getting to play Central Valley should be interesting. Highlands has, again, kind of been a little bit under the radar, really good all year. Been competitive with most of the teams that they've played, even the losses. So interested to see how they stack up if they can get by Dairy with Central Valley in the quarterfinals.
I got to ask Mitch before we move on. How do I say Southmoreland's nickname again?
The Scotties. Is that right?
Wait, say it again.
Scotties.
Scotty. Kyle, how do I say it?
The Scotties.
Scotties. That's wonderful. All right. Before we get to 2A, I just want to remind everybody.
I'm not sure you quite understand how many late nights I've had in the car coming back from a game, and you're running down the score, and it's 10:45 at night, and I hear the Scotties find their way to victory. So it's been an entertainment factor for going on a decade for me.
I get 2 chances every week with Southmoreland and Union, right? So this show here today, fabulous program, is presented by our friends at Edgar Snyder and Associates. Go local. Go with Edgar, helping injured people since 1982. Edgar Snyder and Associates, proud sponsor of the Football Playoff Pairing Show and our WPIAL football playoff coverage, and really playoff coverage all year here on the Trib Live High School Sports Network. Don Rebel, Mitch Montani, Kyle Dawson. We continue on into 2A. Now we're getting into the area where there are multiple, not just 3, 4 wild card spots. It's a 13-team field in Class 2A. The 4 wild card positions in this classification. Our Lady of the Sacred Heart, the 4th place team out of the Allegheny Conference, secures a playoff berth with a victory last night. I keep saying last week. Last night over Keystone Oaks. Waynesburg Central gets a wild card spot, the number 4 team out of the Century Conference, and the 4th and 5th place teams out of the Midwestern Athletic Conference, as expected, get a playoff berth. Riverside was the 4th place team. They are the 10th seed. Beaver Falls, the 12th seed, as the 5th place team out of the MAC. So no big surprises there. I guess the only other team that you could have put on the 2A bubble that I sort of brought up late in our discussion last night was New Brighton, the number 6 team out of the Midwestern Athletic Conference. You know, whether they had enough on the resume to bump either Waynesburg Central or Our Lady of the Sacred Heart. But again, I think that these 4 wild card teams in Class 2A pretty much earned what they were given.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, I think they got the teams right. When I was digging after you brought up New Brighton last night, I think if anything, for me, what would have been a selling factor was only a 6-2 win against a winless Union team last night. I don't know that played a huge factor. I don't know that they would have been heavily considered had they won by 20, 30 points last night. Waynesburg Central's playing good football. 3 of the final 4 wins. The loss was a close loss on the road at Keystone Oaks, so they weren't super competitive early in the year in their losses. But of late, they've played some pretty good football down there in Greene County, so good to see Waynesburg Central get in. Beaver Falls, quite the turnaround, too, from last year. I think a winless season last year to get the 4, and their little streak in the middle of the year there was impressive, and I think Olsh helped their case. I think they would have been in anyway, but the win last night for Olsh over a playoff-bound Keystone Oak Golden Eagles team certainly did not hurt the cause for Olsh in the wild card discussion.
Yeah, I agree they got the teams right. And if you look at just the way it stacks up, if you take 6 from the Midwestern, you're forcing the Century Conference to only have 3 make it. And so it certainly conferences are different. Some are more difficult than others, but I don't think there's that much of a discrepancy. So I think they got it right to send 5 teams out of the Midwestern and then 4 from the other 2. But I think one to watch on the right side of that bracket is Western Beaver. Got to see them in the playoffs a year ago when they beat, I believe, Carlington in the first round. And they're one to watch, and they have quite the home field advantage up there in Western Beaver. So they're going to be a very strong contender with that 9-1 overall record out of the Midwestern Conference. And I was almost a little intrigued that Seton LaSalle did get the 1, but Western Beaver just as good an opportunity to compete from the right side.
I wonder if the permanent lights in industry at Rich Needballa Field helped that get them a 2 seed and a bye. I'm just saying, because both myself and Chris Harlan had them as a 4 seed. Not saying they don't deserve a 2. Don't get me wrong, but that might have helped. Knowing that game, that WPIAL likes to get all their district playoff games on a Friday. So that was the case with them now having the permanent lights. They get the 2 seed. They won't have to use them until the quarterfinals. All right, left side of the bracket, 3 first-round playoff games. The top seed, Seton LaSalle. They beat Washington in a competitive game at Dormont Stadium to win the Century Conference Championship. This is a team that made it all the way to Acrisure Stadium last year, losing a tough one to South Park. So they get a first-round bye. 9 at 8, it's Our Lady of the Sacred Heart visiting Mohawk. 13 at 4, Waynesburg Central at South Allegheny. And 12 at 5, Beaver Falls visiting Washington.
Yeah, the Seton LaSalle, I think, is the 1 seed because of what happened at Gladiator Stadium last night between South Allegheny and Steel Valley. I think if it's not for Steel Valley winning in general, but winning kind of convincingly, you might be looking at a different order of the top 4. That kind of threw a monkey wrench into what would have probably been a runaway for South Allegheny had they won last night, being the top overall seed in 2A. So they slide all the way down to 4 and don't get a bye. And when I was sifting through some of the bracketology that was on social or on our website, especially with Don and Chris, to see Western Beaver end up getting the 2, I guess, is a little bit surprising, but a 9-1 record. And I guess in what you could term the weakest conference overall, maybe, despite the fact that they have the 5 teams in, would have put Western Beaver the weakest conference champion had they been seeded 4th, is interesting. But if South Allegheny would have, at the very minimum, been a little bit more competitive last night, maybe we're having a different conversation in terms of who gets the 3 seed in the bye. Washington Seton LaSalle competitive game last night. If Washington can slide by in the first round and maybe get score an upset victory, you think, against South Allegheny, maybe another rematch with Seton LaSalle, and then those 2 teams would be chomping at the bit to see each other again come semifinal time. But don't look past Bobby Fadden and the Mohawk Warriors either. That's a pretty good football team.
Yeah, that'll be a good matchup, and Seton LaSalle, as you mentioned, Kyle, kind of finding itself as the number 1 seed with all the chaos yesterday. But South Allegheny still with a pretty good path, I think. That should be, at least on the left side of the bracket, the most I'd expect to be lopsided game. And props to Waynesburg Central for a great season, but they're running into a really tough team in South Allegheny, one that I don't know if they'd have been the 1, but they certainly would have not been playing next Friday night if they would have pulled through yesterday. So Washington Beaver Falls, I think, could lead to an intriguing matchup. But as you mentioned, Kyle, if Washington could get by, it could set up some excitement, especially in the quarterfinals and semifinals.
Right side of the bracket. I was distracted. I apologize. Right side of the bracket. Western Beaver, we talked about them. They get the number 2 seed. They will play the winner of the 10-7 matchup. That's Riverside at Apollo Ridge. Number 3 seed goes to Steel Valley, coming off the big win of South Allegheny. They get the winner of Keystone Oaks at Elwood City.
Yeah, Elwood City goes 5-2 in the Midwestern, and they'll have a team that props to Keystone Hooks for getting into the playoffs, but I think we can expect Elwood City to pull through in that one. Western Beaver, though, I think has the clear-cut edge in the top right quadrant. Steel Valley has the clear-cut edge in the bottom right quadrant. And that's in all likelihood going to be the semifinal matchup. So that seems to me like a collision course between two teams that are probably going to see each other down the line, between Western Beaver and Steel Valley.
Yeah, I think the only wrinkle in that maybe is Apollo Ridge kind of quietly ending up as a tri-conference champion in that conference with Steel Valley and South Allegheny. They did have the 18-14 win, I believe it was a couple weeks ago, and that at the time when AR beat Steel Valley was a little bit of an eyebrow raiser in that conference, and knowing the pedigree that Steel Valley's program has had. They might not be the old Steel Valley Ironman right now. But man, what an impressive win for Steel Valley last night. If it ends up being Western Beaver and Steel Valley in the semifinals, it should be a tremendous football game. And I think 2A of all the brackets is probably the most top heavy of the brackets other than 6A, the most top heavy of the brackets and the 5 that are not 6A in terms of classification strength. But I think you've got some intriguing matchups down the line in 2A as opposed to earlier on. And Don mentioned at the top, you could be going home with a pretty nasty treat next week if you're one of those lower seeded teams, and even into the quarterfinals, one of those lower seeded teams in that classification.
Class 2A bracket, competitive all season, but as Kyle mentioned, maybe a little on the top heavy side. We'll see. A lot of representation from the Midwestern Athletic Conference. All right, finally, Class A. It's a full 16-team playoff field. 4 wild cards in this one. Let's take a look at those 4. First and foremost, the number 4 team out of the Black Hills Conference is the who am I missing here?
Monessen.
Monessen. Wow, that's right. That's because they were way down as the 15th seed. Yeah. Monessen beats Cornell in the big battle for 4th place in the Black Hills Conference. There was some thought that the winner of that game and the loser of that game could get in. Monessen took care of business at home. They earned that 4th place wild card spot. The Eastern Conference, for a second straight year, sends 2 teams as wild cards, the 4th and 5th place teams. Fraser finishes 4th outright. They earned that wild card spot. And Greensburg Central Catholic. I don't think too many people had the Centurions going into the playoffs heading into week 9, but a very, very impressive victory over Eastern Conference runner-up Leechburg gets the Centurions into the playoff berth, into the playoff bracket, I should say, as the number 14 seed. Avella does get in as the number 4 team out of the Tri-County South. Again, they finished tied in tiebreaker points with Beth Center, but because they beat the Bulldogs earlier this year, the Eagles are flying into the postseason as the number 16 seed. Out as far as the bubble teams are concerned, Cornell, which lost to Monessen, finished in 5th place in the Black Hills Conference. And whoever finishes in 4th place in the Big 7, likely Shenango, that game played earlier this afternoon. Their fate was decided probably around kickoff time, that didn't matter if they won or lost. They were not going to the playoffs as, again, the extra team from the East and Avella gets in. Was that a surprise to anybody?
I think so. And I think so mostly because, and Mitch and I both know from covering games down there, as I like to say, I was born and raised in the Tri-County South from my time at Waynesburg. But I was a little surprised to see Avella get in. And that's just because I think a lot of people don't see the Tri-County South as legitimate fair or foul. There's three pretty good teams at the top of the conference this year. I know Jefferson Morgan got beat up a little bit last night, but Ben Hayes has been awesome at Bentworth throughout the course of the year, and Ed Woods has that California team seemingly at the near top of the conference every single year. So a little surprised to see Avella in. They did lose 3 straight to end the year, including a close loss to a Carmichael's team that didn't end up making the playoffs either. Pounded by Jefferson Morgan and mercy rolled last night by Bentworth. But they did start 6-1, and that was a really good start for the Avella Eagles and kind of historic for them as a little bit of a rebirth of the program. So I'm, as a Tri-County South disciple, I am happy to see Avella in. I'm a little puzzled at Cornell. Shenango did end up winning that game. I think it was 28-6. I saw from James and the guys earlier who covered that game, but I was fine with leaving Shenango out no matter the result tonight against a Summit Academy team that obviously wasn't going to be a part of the conversation.
And the Big Seven Conference has been down this year.
Yeah, 100%. And I think your big debate, if there is one, and maybe Cornell is the one that's next besides South Fayette up in 5A that would have the greatest discussion to be a wild card team. But at that point, you're either going to leave Monessen out or you're leaving Avella out. And to be honest, I think the 6-4 Avella record might have gotten them in. Had it not been for Greensburg Central Catholic's win over Leechburg last night, too, who knows what happens. If they lose to Leechburg either convincingly or just at all, GCC might not be in the dance here in Class 1A. So that was a huge win for the Centurions last night.
Yeah, I agree with Kyle. I think out of all the brackets we've looked at so far, this is the one where I think, despite all the issues we've had throughout the course of the show with seeding, I think for the most part they've gotten the teams right. I'm not quite sure in this Class 1A bracket. I love the Avella Eagles. I love the Tri-County South. Kyle and I have spent a lot of time covering football in that area, but I'm not quite sure the Eagles should have made the playoffs. And I wouldn't argue that Shenango should have gotten in. Of course, if they lost to Summit Academy today, Summit Academy would have been the number 4 team in the Big Seven with a 2-8 record. So I don't think there's much of an argument for Shenango. I think Cornell would have been the team for me to slip in and get that 16th seed in that final playoff spot. But hey, Avella's in, and we'll see if they make the most of it.
You might be a sacrificial lamb to Fort Cherry, but Cornell also lost by 36 points to the Rangers earlier this year. So I don't know if that had anything to do with the discussion, not wanting to see that you could flip around the seeds at the bottom. I don't know, but Fort Cherry is going to roll Avella. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, he could have sent Cornell to Clareton and Monessen to well, I guess not.
Either
Who's
way.
the 14th seed? Greensburg Central. They're a 5th place finisher. Put them at Fort Cherry. But nonetheless, I kind of agree. If you look at if Cornell and Avella played at a neutral site somewhere, not that I condone gambling at all, especially in lieu of what's going on in sports. But I know who I would be favoring and probably favoring heavily in that game. But again, that's if you're talking about the 16th seed, you got to just do more to make sure you secure a spot. All right, let's take a look at the left side of the Class A bracket. 16th seed is Avella. They will take the short jaunt as far as, Avella is kind of out there in the middle of nowhere. Having gone there a couple times, it is a trek. Probably one of the closest school districts to the Avella School District is Fort Cherry, so it is a short trip to take on the 2-time defending champion Fort Cherry Rangers. Neshannock is at Leechburg. Jefferson Morgan is at Laurel. That's the 13-4 matchup. And then Chartiers Houston visits Southside.
Yeah, I have a hard time getting intrigued by much in Class 1A in general because I think this is the bracket that 1-2 is probably the biggest lock in my mind to get to the championship game and to have a rematch between Fort Cherry and Clareton. That said, I think there are some good matchups in the first round. Leechburg stumbled, obviously, last night Neshannock has played pretty good football at times this year. That an 8-9 matchup should always be intriguing. So curious to see what happens there. That's not an easy trip for Neshannock either to go out to Leechburg. Is a 9 seed, and Dawn mentions the 16 seeds trip is a lot easier than the 9 seeds trip going to number 8 Leechburg. Laurel and Jefferson Morgan, I think you see the product of the Tri-County South there, with Jefferson Morgan having a chance, I think, last night to clinch a share of the conference championship if they could have beat California. But they end up as a 13 seed at a pretty good Laurel team. And Southside's been under the radar for several years now. They've been a really good program over the course of the last several years. So I'm interested to see how well Southside can do in the bottom of that bracket. And Chartiers Houston with a nice turnaround, but I think it probably is favored to end this week.
Yeah, I agree. And just another note, just to Kyle's point about you really have a collision course here between Fort Cherry and the Clareton Bears. And just something to note, Fort Cherry faced the number 3 seed in Bishop Canavan a couple of weeks back and beat them 56-19. And so I think that tells you everything you need to know, that there's the top 2 teams and then a pretty big gap for the rest of the field. So I think we can expect Fort Cherry to really have its way, at least with the top left quadrant of that bracket. Had the opportunity to see Laurel earlier in the season against Bishop Canavan. And so Laurel's a strong team, and I expect them to make some noise and have a little bit of a path, I think, having to get through, well, first Jefferson Morgan, but then in all likelihood Southside to get to the semifinals. But Laurel's a strong team, and I expect them to be competitive up until that Fort Cherry matchup.
Right side of the bracket. I've been saying this all year in Class A, to be honest. We're talking about teams on the bubble that didn't get in. So I think there's a tremendous competitiveness, tremendous competition in Class A. And it was that case last year too, with the exception of Fort Cherry and Clareton. I think there's no question there is a large gap, but the rest of the playoffs, assuming it's Rangers, Bears, take 2 at Acrisure, the rest of the tournament should be fun to watch play out, including the other 6 first-round games. Some good action. I thought it's been a good couple of years in this classification. The right side of the bracket, Clareton tries to continue their shutout streak when they host Monessen on Friday at Tyler Boyd Stadium. Bentworth will be hosting Jeanette. Good matchup there in the 10-7 contest. Kimoni Brown for Jeanette, Ben Hayes for Bentworth, 2 of the better players in the classification. Dormont Stadium, the site of the 14-3 game Greensburg Central Catholic against Bishop Canavan. And California will be hosting Fraser on Friday night at 7 o'clock in the 6-11 matchup.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest matchup, at least for me to watch in the first round playoff games in Class 1A. That's that bottom right game. California facing a Fraser team that played in a very tough Eastern Conference with GCC in there as well, also squeaking in Jeanette, Leechburg. And so I think the Commodores have quite a chance against California, and that's really one of those ones where we'll see where or how much strength the Tri-County South has, because that's its top representative, the California Trojans as the number 6 seed, and we'll see how they're able to handle a tough Fraser team. Bentworth, a great season for them as well, and we'll see if they're able to beat Jeanette. I think those are 2 tests for the strength of the Tri-County South there in first-round games.
Yeah, see how those 2 teams handled. I think that's just where it goes back to that discussion of Avella getting in. Your top overall seed out of the TCS and your conference champion is the 6th seed. Your second place team is the 7 seed. Is definitely telling of what the committee in general thinks about that conference and how deep or how top heavy it may be. But to be a 6 seed, to get a team in Fraser who's, I guess, semi-close, that's not a terrible trip. Will be interesting to watch what happens in that game. See if Ben Hayes can kind of will the Bearcats against the Jeanette Jayhawks. But again, I would be stunned if anybody on this side of the bracket is able to maybe even score against Clairton. I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't care who you're playing. They haven't allowed a point since week 0 in that 1912 loss to Imani Christian, and I don't know how close teams have come. Again, I don't care if you're playing the worst team to ever grace the field on the football field. To have the shutout streak that Clairton is having, to not have allowed a point since week 0 is just ridiculously impressive. And I just think it's a collision course in 1A. There might be intrigue surrounding the rest of the bracket. I would be stunned if on November 22nd at 11 a.m. it's not the Rangers and the Bears lining up to play each other again at Acrisure Stadium. That's just how good those two teams. And it's not just Matt Sig in Fort Cherry either. I know that a lot of people will look at Matt Sig and how talented he is, but that defense is tremendous. They're quick to the ball. And they've got some other playmakers around Matt that have been really great over the course of what is a great run for the Rangers. It'll be a tough task against Clairton if that does end up being the matchup. But hopefully some intrigue, like Don was mentioning, around those 2 seeds. But I would certainly expect this to end the same way we've been talking about all year.
Agree. Could see a lot of familiar faces, whether it's at Acrisure Stadium on Saturday, November 22nd, or the Saturday before at Pine Richland, not Norwin, where the championships have been for 6A and 4A. Renovations going on there. So Pine Richland will be hosting the 6A and the 4A championships on the 15th, Saturday, the 15th. All right, before we wrap it up, just want to, again, remind everybody that the show today and the WPIAL playoffs on Trib HSSN, presented by Edgar Snyder and Associates. Go local, go with Edgar, helping injured people since 1982, not only today, but throughout the WPIAL playoffs and really into the winter sports and the fall sport or the spring sports, because we still continue there. We don't hibernate. We will be thanking our friends at Edgar Snyder and Associates for their help. Great stuff. The brackets are already up on the website. Chris Harlan has already got things to watch in each of the 6 brackets up on our website as well. So check it out. It's the fun of it. Every day, something new on our website. It's if you're a high school football fan, kind of must see reading each and every day. hssn.triblive.com. 2 key players in our coverage here, kind enough to join me today, Kyle Dawson and Mitch Montani. Job well done, guys.
Good to be here. We appreciate that. Little golf clap for everybody.
Yeah, let's fire up the band for, ladies and gentlemen, Mitch Montani and Kyle Dawson. There you go. That's right. Big fan, big fan. And as far as our producer, Chris Lackner. All right. We thank Christopher as well. So we got Rebel Yell podcast. Wednesday, we will be releasing our big first round or first Friday preview of the WPIAL playoffs. If you enjoy the capsules, the football capsules I produce every week, where the 6 games, 1 in each classification, what to watch for, historic factoids. I know Kyle's a big fan of the historic factoids.
Yeah,
we'll be doing 1 for every playoff game. Have mercy, I got to start writing right now. So check that out on Thursday evening. That'll be up on our site as well. All right, for the entire Trib HSSN team, it's been a great regular season, and we are fired up for the WPIAL playoffs 2025. Whether the brackets are right or wrong, we are excited. For Mitch Montani, Kyle Dawson, Chris Lackner, I'm Don Rebel. Thank you for joining us. the WPIAL Football Playoff Pairing Show presented by Edgar Snyder and Associates here on the Trib Live High School Sports Network.